Thank you, Peter. We all know how complicated the story of the Spanish Civil War can get. Just think of all the acronyms. The boom, the Sante, the FI, etc. And yet the temptation on all sides has always been to simplify. The Cold War certainly did not help in this respect. Over the past 70 years, we have seen competing partisan stories: communist, Catholic, Trotskyite, anarchist, Francoist, Falangista, Negrinista, Prietista, being woven into ever tighter fabrics with clearly assigned roles for heroes and villains, victims and henchmen, plotters and dupes. But it's surprising how easy these tightly woven plots can be undone. Sometimes it's enough to pull at one single strand to reveal a whole new pattern, reminding us that historical reality is always more complex than we remember it, and making us realize how much we still do not know. The archive holds thousands of different stories, each of which puts the Civil War in a slightly different light, sometimes sadder, sometimes more uplifting, always more complex. As Helen Graham recently said, telling big stories through individual human lives is a very powerful way of doing history. This is what Albus Teaching Institutes are all about, bringing teachers and students into direct contact with the primary sources so that they can begin unraveling narrative fabrics, discovering individual stories on their own. Here is a compelling example. In late November, this photo appeared in the Spanish press. It was a portrait, the caption said, of an unidentified African-American member of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. One of the few things known about the image was that it was shot by Agustí Centelles, a well-known Catalan war photographer who had died in 1985, leaving behind a huge archive containing thousands of images of the Spanish Civil War. This archive had just been purchased in November by the government in Madrid to be included in the National Civil War Archive in Salamanca. And by the way, this coming spring, in February, there will be an exhibit of Centelles photography opening at the King Juan Carlos Center here in New York on Washington Square. As Centelles' two sons handed over their father's work, they made an unusual request. Would Spain's Prime Minister, José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, be willing to give a print of this particular photo to President Obama on his next visit to Spain by way of tribute to the more than 100 African Americans who had served in the Lincoln Brigade? The government quickly agreed. The Centelles brothers then called on the rest of the world to help them identify the man in the photo so that they could contact his family and tell him about this. Soon the story began to make the global media rounds. The search was on. Of course, this was a challenge that Alba could not pass up. Perhaps against our better judgment, my friend Jim Fernandez and I undertook an obsessive search. Our adventure proved more difficult than we had figured, and the process was as frustrating as it was elating. The presence of African American volunteers in the Lincoln Brigade has been thoroughly researched, and since the racial integration of the American volunteer units was a source of great pride to all, the photographic record of the black volunteers is particularly extensive. Jim and I were confident it would take us a few days in the archive to put a name to the face. Meanwhile, in the media, confusion reigned. Websites and blogs from all over the world joined in on a wild guessing game. Was he Paul Williams from Youngstown, Ohio, one of the several African-American aviators who flew for the Republic? Is he? No. Or was he John Porter Hunter, a metalworker from Alabama? No way. Or Milt Herndon from Wyoming, Ohio, the brother of the well-known African-American communist organizer Angelo Herndon, and killed in action in Spain. Here, the resemblance seemed quite strong, especially when we flipped the image. For a while, Herndon was our front runner. But hold on a second. Soon after the Centelles photo was published, we stumbled across a second image, clearly taken on the same day. Here we see a frontal shot of our volunteer holding a banner that reads in Spanish, 1st American Battalion, A. Lincoln, Centuria Antonio Guiteras, International Brigade. In fact, the Guiteras unit was one of the 3 sections making up the 1st Infantry Company of the Lincoln Battalion. which itself became part of the 15th International Brigade of the Spanish Republican Army, which was formed in late January 1937. Named after the late Cuban politician and revolutionary Antonio Guiterres, the Centuria included about 100 Cuban soldiers. Many of them had left from the United States, where they had been living as political exiles. They were anti-fascists who thought that fighting in Spain would help them prepare for revolution in their own country. Of course, they'd had to wait another 20 years or so for that to happen. The baptism by fire on Spanish soil for the Guiterres group was the Jarama battle in February 1937, which decimated the ranks of the 1st Division. Among the dead was Rodolfo de Armas, the founder and charismatic leader of the Cuban unit. Now, the discovery that our man may have been Cuban posed a dilemma. If we were right, the whole motivation for the issue's newsworthiness, the link with Obama, would be gone. Can you imagine the socialist prime minister of Spain handing the picture of a Cuban communist to Obama?